Alright everybody, just for full transparency, every gun I use in the firing range will have either hollow point or synthetic ammunition on it, whichever the higher of the two they have, just for testing headshots, just to see if hollow point or synthetic is even worth it. Okay. Alright, so here first in the firing range we have the M433. And if you notice, at first, just up front, it does 25 damage as a maximum. However, I found out in testing this, roughly at about 23 meters, the damage will drop down to 20 damage. And so here I am just testing that, just making sure roughly at about 23 meters, that damage will go from a 25 straight to a 20. There's no in between, there's no partial, it's just 25 straight to 20. However, if you go all the way over to the other end at roughly about 76 meters when I was testing it, the damage will drop down to about 17. So here it is about 20. If I step back just a little bit, right about here, you'll start seeing it do 17 damage. Okay. And these are just hard drops, hard cuts. So if I move forward just 1 meter, I'll get an extra 3 damage. So that is interesting how this is tested out. Okay, now I'm going to go back and test the damage, the headshot damage. Of course, I am using hollow points on this weapon because that's all it has. And just like you expect, it goes from a 1.34 multiplier to a 1.5. Okay, so at first when we were doing 25 damage, that headshot damage went from a 33.5 roughly to a 37.5. So we got about 4 rounds of damage. However, if we move to our 20 damage range, it goes from a 26.8 to a 30. And then at that 17, we go from a 22.78 damage to a 25.5. Now, here's my loadout I like to use for this weapon. And it's typically the same for most of my assault rifles. We have a lightened suppressor, we have a light barrel, slim angled, whatever the base magazine is, lightweight ammunition, and then my favorite sight, the BF2M, the only 2.5 times sight in the entire game. And typically I'll kit this out the exact same way, use it pretty much like this all the time. It's just my setup, it's my favorite thing. This is my baby, or at least it was. You know, I use it a lot. Most of my kills were with this weapon. Alright everyone, so here's the tier list. We have great usable dumpster in all of our ARs, of which I have elite badges on all of them. And at the very end, only one of our great category will ascend to my favorite, and only one of the dumpsters will descend to just absolute dog trash. Alright, so with all my time with assault rifles, I've learned that muzzle velocity doesn't really matter too much unless you're just taking a lot of shots at range and you're trying to track them as they go left to right across your screen. The main thing I want to know with assault rifles is one, the recoil, how much it recoils, and the recoil pattern, how quickly it resets, as well as the rate of fire. Everything else is really just up to you, personal preference. Okay, and as I stated before, the M433 does damage of 25, 20, and 17, with it dropping to 20 and 17 at 23 meters and 76 meters respectively. Okay, it also shoots 830 rounds per minute, meaning that if you get caught in those close quarter situations, it will definitely help you get out of it if you're caught off guard. Alright, so with that, M433 we'll put in the great category. Okay, now for the B36A4, similar to the M433, it does 25 damage to start with, and then drops down to 20 damage as soon as you hit roughly 23 meters. And then later, as you'll see, it will drop down to 17 damage as soon as you hit about 76 meters. Now, the one difference, or I guess a big difference, between the B36A4 and the M433 is that the B36A4 has the synthetic rounds, meaning instead of doing a 1.5 times headshot multiplier, it does a 1.75. So you're going to get a little bit more punch out of those headshots. Okay, you're going to start out doing 43.75 damage off the bat. Then you're going to drop down to 35 once you hit about 23 meters. And then finally at 76 meters or so, you're going to be doing about 29.75 damage. Now, the game doesn't do decimals, so everything is of course rounded, but that's roughly what you should be seeing. All right, and here is my B36A4 with its loadout. Of course, light and suppressor, pretty much everything the exact same as before. Really nothing different. I still do the exact same thing I did with the M433. However, the big thing I want you to notice between these two weapons is that the M433 shoots 830 rounds per minute versus the B36A4, which does 720. Still very capable, still good enough to get you out of pinch in those close range engagements. But the M433 would be better for that. Okay, and for the B36A4, also great category. Alright, so the SOR 556 Mach 2, the big takeaway I want you to notice with this one is that the damage profile is the exact same as the previous two. However, its rate of fire is 568 rounds per minute. So it's going to be very slow. Well, not very slow, but slow enough, right? So if you get caught in those close quarter situations, just understand you will be at a pretty big disadvantage when using this weapon. But again, the damage profile is the same. And unlike the M433, you get access to the synthetic rounds on this one. So again, a little bit more punch for those headshots. So the SOR Mach 2 is a little bit different as far as how I set it up. Because it doesn't have a light barrel, I just do a heavy, but that does save me a little points on the back end. So I typically run a little bit bigger of a magazine if I can, or at least a fast mag if I can. And then since I've completed the challenge, I throw on a rail cover as well, just because I have the points available to do so, and it helps me out by increasing my weapon draw speed. The SOR 556 Mach 2 will be the first one we have entered into the usable category. Now for the AK-4D, our first heavy hitter in the assault rifle category, starting out with 33 damage, and as you see right here, pretty big heavy hitter. Headshot does 50 damage with the hollow point rounds. Once you move over to about that 23 meter range, it will drop down to 25 damage. And then the headshot is going to do a whopping 37.5, which rounds up to 38. And then for the very last, moving over to that 76 meters, you're going to notice it's going to drop down to 20 damage, with the headshot doing 35 damage, as you see right here. Okay, similar to the last weapon, this weapon doesn't actually have a light barrel, so I have to sort of modify it a bit differently, but my default for most situations is just go from the light barrel to the heavy barrel, and then possibly spend the points where I can trying to increase the magazine size, or at the bare minimum, the speed at which I can use that magazine. Now, despite the AK-4D shooting the slowest fire rate of all the assault rifles we have, keep in mind it does do extra damage, so that helps make up for the fact that it does shoot a bit slower. Okay, AK-4D also into the usable category. However, in my opinion, I think it is just slightly better than the SOR. I really do like the AK-4D. Once you get used to its playstyle, it's actually pretty solid, especially when you go into bigger game modes and not just small modes. Now for another heavy hitter, the TR7, again, does the same damage profile as the AK-4D, doing 33 damage to start out, then we'll drop down to 25, and then drop down to 20, again at the same range you're expecting, 23 meters and 76 meters respectively. However, where this thing does come into play and start to come to its own element is that it does shoot at 720 rounds per minute. So it's a heavy hitter, but it also shoots really fast, or at least moderately fast for most people. The TR7 is a bit weird to customize. I still try to keep everything the same. However, I have to get rid of my underbarrel attachment in favor of a bigger magazine. This thing starts with like 20, and once you start using it, you'll realize the speed at which it shoots and its recoil really fight against it, and you end up just needing to use a bigger magazine. Otherwise, you'll find yourself running out of ammunition almost instantly. All right, TR7, hey, bite me. I don't care what anybody says. TR7, dumpster. Just dumpster. The recoil, the small mag, I don't care. Dumpster. Okay. Now for the Cord 6P67. Of course, it is beloved by a lot of people. One, for the meme, but two, it is a fun gun to shoot. It doesn't recoil, so it's very accurate. However, its damage profile leaves a lot to be desired. Starting out at 20 damage maximum, it'll then drop down to 17 damage and finish at around 14 damage at 23 meters and 76 meters respectively. Meaning this is not going to be any type of powerhouse. Where the gun makes up for the fact of its low damage is its fire rate. It does shoot 900 rounds per minute, and considering this thing is a laser beam, you're going to get all your shots on target, or at least you better hope you do, because if you don't, you're dead. From what I can typically see, a lot of people tend to like this weapon if they are console players where they have a little bit of aim assist to help them. But as a PC player, not a massive fan. I'm good with it. It's okay. It's just not my favorite. But in a close quarter situation, this weapon is fun to use. Now, you still might end up losing firefights because, again, it takes 5 shots to kill someone up close, whereas you use something like a TR7, that takes 3. Or if you use something like the M433, that takes 4. So just notice that's something you're gonna have to deal with. Okay, the Cord is also dumpster. And before you bite my head off on this one, I'll explain, I think, sort of more in depth towards the end of why I think these two belong down here. The NVO228E. This weapon is very, very weird. I don't really understand it. First of all, it says it does 33 as its max damage, which is not true, at least from what I can see in the testing range. Maybe I need to get even closer, but at least at 10 meters, the NVO is starting out at 27 damage. Again, maybe I just need to get closer, I'm not sure. But it starts out at 27. It then drops down to 21 damage at 23 meters. And then for some weirdness, I'm not 100% sure why, at 38 meters, it'll drop down to 20 damage. And then at 76 meters, it finishes at 17 damage. So I don't fully understand the point of having that weird double drop in damage, or at least those two extra ranges. I don't know, but it does shoot 654 rounds per minute, so it's not super great, on top of the fact that it doesn't do a massive amount of damage. But hopefully the hollow points could help make this weapon a little bit better. And for the NVO, I kitted out the same as I do the B36A4, the M433, my traditional sort of loadout where I do a light and suppressor, light barrel, slim angled grip, just the base magazine size unless I can afford something bigger, which I never can, lightweight ammunition, and then the BF2M. Typically I run everything. NVO, despite its weird quirks, I'm gonna put it in usable. And actually I think it deserves to be right there. I still, the SOR, I do like it. It's very stable with those medium to longer ranges, so I still think it beats out the NVO. Sorry. Alright, last but not least, the L85A3, which to me is very similar to the B36A4. It's just slower. It does 25 damage, it'll then drop down to 20, and then drop down to 17. Its headshot is even the same as the B36A4, starting out at 43.75, considering they both have synthetic ammunition. It'll then drop down to 35 damage, and then finish off around 29.75 damage. So again, very similar, nothing too special, nothing to write home about, but there you go, testing it out, that long range, and then showing you that damage. It says 29, which is roughly what I got, about 29.75, 28, somewhere around there. Okay, I even try to kit it out the same, so really nothing to write home about. It's pretty much the exact same as B36A4, just slower. And lastly, L85A3, we'll also put that in usable. However, I do believe that I kind of want this to go, it's better than NVO, better than SOR. I'm gonna put it right here. I think that's good. All right, so let's start with the straight dog trash category. Okay, so the reason these two are definitely in the dumpster category amongst the other things that I've mentioned is that when you take them into bigger game modes, they just don't thrive as well as some of the usable category and the great category. These guns are pretty much only used, in my opinion, for small modes. Can you use them in bigger modes? Yes, they're just not going to do as well as some of the other guns in usable and great. With that being said, they are fun to use. I'm not knocking them at all. They are fun to use, but just trying to take them to bigger game modes is not going to work out well, at least not for me. I can use them in bigger game modes. It's just a bit of a hassle. But if you do want to play them in smaller game modes, fine. I also don't feel like because of these sort of suck at bigger game modes that they deserve to be in the carbine category, not really assault rifle category. As a matter of fact, I think the MTAR in past games was actually a carbine, not an assault rifle, but I might be wrong. But for the ones that for me would be absolute straight dog trash for me, TR7. Okay, its recoil is just atrocious. Even in close quarters modes, it is just all over the place. If you can find a way to rein that in, you're good. But then also another thing that's massively fighting against it is the small mag size. So if you're missing some shots, which you will miss because of this recoil, it's just double-edged sword. You're burning the candle at both ends. First of all, the recoil is atrocious. Then you have a smaller magazine than average. It just does not work for me, especially not in the big game modes, and then even the close quarters sort of game modes. It works, but it's just not my favorite to use. Cord, a little bit better. Okay. All right. So now for my personal favorite between the M433 and the B36A4. So a lot of you who've watched the channel know I have more kills and more time with the M433. B36A4, it's fine. In other games, it's similar to the G36AC. It's fine, it's good. I actually have, you know, again, most of my kills on the M433. It's fun to use. However, I'm not sure if it's been an update or whatnot. I don't like this one as much as I used to. And just recently going back to using the B36A4, it is very stable at those medium to long ranges. So if I need to fully auto somebody at a pretty far range, I can still do that. M433, I'm not sure if I just lost my touch or if it was an update. It's not the same. Can I still like switch to single fire and tap somebody down? 100%. But I can do that same exact thing with the B36A4. The only thing I would think the M433 went out with is that in close quarters it shoots 110 rounds faster than the B36A4. However, in my thought process is that if you have at least 700 rounds per minute, odds are you're probably going to win in a firefight. You just have to be quick on the draw. But the M433 is, again, more forgiving in that. But my personal favorite, B36A4. Okay. So with that, that's going to be it for me. If you guys liked the video, please leave a like. If you want to subscribe, please subscribe. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye. Like and subscribe.